Welcome to the Profitable Productivity Podcast. I am your host, Tressetta Washington, and our aim with the podcast is to do a deep dive into all the essential skills that empower nonprofit leaders to thrive. And today we're exploring the power of emotional intelligence. And I'm excited because we have a truly inspiring guest, my friend and colleague in these internet streets, Sid Scott. Sid is a life coach who specializes in helping mission driven leaders reconnect with their purpose while honoring their well being. And y'all know that I'm all about that life. I'm all about making sure that we achieve what we want, but not sacrificing our well being. So, through his transformative cure framework, which is grounded in neuroscience, Sid helps passionate leaders move from overwhelm and burnout to sustainable impact. But before I introduce Sid and bring him onto the stage, I want to encourage you, if this topic resonates with you, then go ahead and share it with the first fellow nonprofit leader who comes to your mind. And don't forget to check out the show notes for all of the important updates within our community. So I am excited to have Sid join us today. Please welcome him to the Profitable Productivity Podcast. Sid, I'm so excited that you're joining me today. How are you?
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you. I am doing well.
Awesome. I understand that you recently relocated to my home state, Texas,
Yeah,
the Yellow Rose of Texas. How's it treating you down there or over there, I guess?
very well. Honestly, so good. Man, it's been so great. I have too many things to say about Texas. We could have a whole other show about that.
Yeah, we'll have to talk offline about the joys of Texas. So anyway, um, before we get into kind of today's topic, tell us a little bit about yourself and what really sparked your passion for emotional intelligence.
Yeah, so a little bit about me. I've been a full-time coach for the past 3 years now after I got out of the military. I was active duty military in counterterrorism and counterintelligence for 8 years. And then I got out and started my coaching business. And it was really throughout that time that became more and more passionate about emotional intelligence, mindfulness, things of that nature. Because while I was serving active duty, there was this abandoning myself in the name of service, in the name
Mm,
of high performance. And so neglecting my own well-being in this way, led to depression, it led to burnout, it led to chronic lower back issues that like actually showed up on an MRI. Um, and all of these things really forced me to level up how I took care of myself. It forced pauses that I didn't necessarily ask for, but that I actually needed. And so now it's really about like, how can I take that and help others see like, okay, how can we perform at a high level? How can we serve at a high level? And how can we do that without leaving our well-being behind? And I think we really have to ask ourselves, how do we make a big difference without hurting ourselves or losing ourselves in the process?
that is so good. I resonate with that so much because that's a lot of my own journey. I had some um what did you call them? Those pauses. The
Forced pauses.
forced, yes, I had some of those forced pauses as well, and kind of went through my own journey of recognizing that I had been abandoning self along my life journey, and that return to self, like that shedding of all of those identities, all of those expectations, and really returning to self, and putting self first, what has been really life transforming for me. And I'm so much more happy. I'm so much more at peace and fulfilled now that I have kind of walked through that process, even if going through it's not comfortable. It's
Right.
not comfortable at all. It's very uncomfortable. And so I'm looking forward to kind of digging a little deeper into that conversation. I want to I'd like to start off the show with a quick tip. So for our listeners who maybe are in a crunch for time right now, what is emotional intelligence exactly, and what emotional intelligence tool can leaders start using right now that's going to help to create a noticeable shift in not only themselves but in their teams?
Yeah, for sure. So, emotional intelligence is really just our capacity to recognize and navigate emotions with skill. It's about being able to choose a response versus reacting to everything that's happening. Now, let's define emotion for a second. Emotion is just energy in motion. There's an article in Psychology Today that defines emotions as internal subjective experiences, facial expressions, and physiological reactions. Energy, right? So there's a book that I've studied that makes this a pretty quick and easy thing to grasp, and it's called The Levels of Energy by Frederick Dodson, and he adapts the levels of energy scale from Dr. Hawkins, who wrote the book Power versus Force, I think it's called. Anyways, the scale breaks down consciousness or our frequency or our energy, from any given moment, from shame and fear in the low ranges to peace and enlightenment in the high ranges. Now, most people in their general day to day are operating between 1 to 200, on that scale, cycling between apathy, grief, fear, and just basic biological needs like I'm hungry, I'm bored, whatever. Now, the thing about leadership is that it requires us to maintain a higher frequency where we have courage, where we have reason, where we have love. And so here's like your practical tool. It's just 3 times to start throughout the day. Check in with yourself and notice, where am I on the scale of frequency, of energy? And you can Google this. You can just Google the levels of energy frequency chart and look at where you're at. If you're below level 200, you're probably reactive. You're probably feeling defensive about something someone said, or you're probably wanting to withdraw and pull away. If you're at 200 to 350, you know, you're likely operating in your head. You're getting stuff done. You're being logical, but you might be missing the nuance that you need to deal with other people and their emotions. Now, if you're in a higher frequency state, if you're in a good place, that's when you're intuitive, that's when you're empathic, that's when you're, solution focused in a way that serves everybody. So when you notice that you're in this lower frequency state, anxiety, frustration, overwhelm, just pause, take some deep breaths, and just understand that this is going to create the space for you to consciously choose your response rather than react. And you can do this type of check-in, multiple times throughout the day. And you can do this type of check-in when it's time for you to engage or respond to something.
That, oh my gosh, I felt like you were stepping on my toes a little a little bit, because over the weekend, I realized that I was being kind of snappy, and but
Yeah.
I also recognized that it was not so much the person or the situation, it was because I was tired. I was at a conference, week before last, and it was, a 3-day conference, and I'm more introverted, and being around that amount of people is very energetically draining for me. And typically, when I have to do that, I build in a day or two when I return or after an event for me to recuperate. However, my schedule just didn't allow for me to be able to do that. So I went straight from that into a very hectic schedule. And the entire week was extremely busy until Saturday. And so by the time Saturday came around, I was just like, I wasn't in a good place. And so I was, like snapping at everybody. And I think that had I kind of taken a step back and thought about this, and then, and even maybe had a conversation, right? And said, hey, listen, like I'm tired right now and I'm probably not showing up as my best self. Could you give me a little space until I have an opportunity to rest? So being self-aware, right? And that a huge part of self-leadership anyway is being able to be aware when you are in those different energy levels so that you can do something to shift that. um, you mentioned, kind of like pausing and, doing that check in and assessing kind of where you are. You mentioned the deep breathing. Like, how else can we slow down, right? Like, what does that look like? How do we actually implement that? Because we're busy. So how do we actually get to a place where we can slow down and pause and take care of self?
Yeah, you're so right. We're the busiest and most overloaded that we've ever been. And the thing that I see often is this idea that, slowing down means I'm sacrificing my growth, I'm sacrificing my success, I'm sacrificing, the life that I could be living.
Mhm.
And the thing that I want to highlight with slowing down is it's not sacrificing growth, it's not sacrificing success. It's actually going to make you and your teams more effective. But the thing is, like you said, we're living in a culture right now where busyness is like the badge of honor that so many of us put on and wear, whether we know it or not. And this creates three big barriers to rest, to slowing down what we're talking about. And the first one is like the productivity paradox, where you think that if I'm constantly doing something, if I'm constantly in the mix, if I'm going from one thing to the next thing, like you said, without taking breaks, that means I'm being effective. Okay. The second big barrier to slowing down and rest, and I want to talk about this before we even, get into how to do it, is the guilt that we feel
Oh my
around
gosh, yes.
rest. It's guilt programming where we view rest as selfish. And then the
Mhm.
third thing is this digital drain that we experience where we're like perpetually accessible. I'm holding up my phone right here for those listening. This thing that we carry is draining us digitally all the time. And we have to highlight this before we even talk about rest, because we have to just understand how dangerous and impactful this really is, both for our minds, and our bodies. Our brains were not designed for perpetual activity and
Yeah.
activation. So when we're constantly pushing, our stress hormones stay elevated. We start making foggy decisions. To your point, we start maybe snapping and getting short. We have emotional reactivity. And on top of that, we're physically exhausting ourselves. And so the thing about rest, in when we understand this, is it's not just a pause. It's how we recharge ourselves. It's how we
Yeah.
restore ourselves. And the thing is, like, we operate in this other space, usually masking for some sort of deeper fear, whether it's a fear of not being enough, whether it's a fear of falling behind, whether it's a fear of losing control. We use busyness as a way to avoid sitting with these uncomfortable truths. You said these pauses are uncomfortable at times. These forced pauses, especially, can be uncomfortable, but the true breakthrough happens in the pause. Like you said, not when we're pushing, but when we pause, when we take a step back, when we slow down. But like when we resist that, we're actually resisting our own power to be more present, to be more creative, to be more impactful. So how do we practically implement more pause or more rest? I have like a couple simple strategies. The first one is designating an hour each day where you're not connected to anything digital. You're connected to something that rebuilds you and restores you on a spiritual level.
I
Whether
love
that's
that.
a whether it's a book that you like, whether it's a friend, in person, like having real conversation, whatever that looks like for you. The next thing is taking 10 minutes to yourself before any meeting or interaction. Just taking 10 minutes to think about where you're at on the energy scale, how you're feeling in your body in that moment, being honest with yourself about where you're at and where you're not, right? And just being with that. Okay. And those are a couple tips, and I'm sure we can get into more, but rest and slowing down is a life-changing principle, especially for those of us who are in, the leadership space, those of us who are taking care of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the hardest for people who are highly ambitious, those type A personalities, because we're accustomed to like going and doing and achieving. And it seems counterintuitive for us to step away from work. It's like, I've got these goals, I've got these things that I want to accomplish, and I'm going to fall behind if I take a step back. But like you said, and this is something I talk about all the time, we have to be intentional with our rest, because it is in the times when we step away from our work that we're able to innovate, that we're able to be more creative, that we're able to problem solve. It's not when we're in the thing and looking at the thing and doing the thing, it's when we step away, because when we're doing the thing, we're stepping into our the analytical side of our brain. And when we step away and we're just kind of being in the world, that's when we can activate the creative side of the brain. So I love that you said that. It's really intentional. And then the like plugging in to a restorative source. And you held up your phone earlier. One of the things that I like to use the phone as an example. Just like you use your phone throughout the day, the battery drains. And there's many people, most people are either camp plug up every time there's a charger nearby, and then there's the camp of wait till the battery runs all the way down before plugging it up. And for those people who wait until the battery dies or is almost dead to plug it takes longer to recharge. And our bodies are the same way. If you wait until you're completely worn out and you completely are out of energy, it's going to take so much longer for you to recharge. But if you build in daily times of intentional rest, that's going to enable you to recharge more, power up more quickly, so you stay at your best all the time, rather than having these like roller coaster ups and downs, highs and lows within your energy levels and your ability to be productive.
Yeah. So good.
Sorry, I got on a tangent.
No, that's amazing. That was really good. Yeah. And even to add to that with the phone analogy, like, when you take the iPhone, you can look at your battery settings. You can see how much life that battery has. The
Yeah,
more you drain it, the more you recharge it, the more you use it. Eventually that battery runs out and it's not even able to recharge anymore. And
yeah,
I think that we forget sometimes that our physicality is very finite. It is not infinite. And so we have to move accordingly.
yeah. And I think that um especially nonprofit leaders who tend to be in helping professions, I think that there's this like we want to save the world kind of mentality, and they struggle with rest. And I think about how on the plane, I travel quite a bit, and one of the things where they're going through the safety is like, should the cabin lose pressure, the oxygen mask will fall. Put your mask on before helping those who are around you or that you're traveling with. So like, why do you think it is that people struggle, especially leaders struggle with rest, and why is it such a life-changing principle for them to incorporate rest into their everyday strategies for being productive?
Yeah, I think, the biggest struggle ultimately just comes down to what we believe about rest and what it means. And of course, there's, societal factors. There's like our socioeconomic background where we come from. There's our, like our unique trauma history and how that informs how we show up in the world. There's all these different things that ultimately shape our belief and our, relationship to rest. Now, what happens with that is those in the helping profession tend to believe that, rest is somewhat selfish and it's taking away, from their mission and the people that they're here to help. But it's a life changing principle and it makes you so much more effective. And I saw this, firsthand being someone, that led in a very high performance environment. And there's a couple things that I want to get into with this. The first thing that we have to understand is physical rest recharges your body. And we've talked about our physicality. It has a place, right? Our brain and our thinking, it has a place, but we're more than that. We have this creativity. We have this, infinite nature to come up with innovation and great ideas, right? And so how do we recharge that part of ourselves? Right? Physical rest is for physical exertion, but we also need spiritual rest. We need to create space for reflection and reconnection to our purpose, why we're here, why we
Yeah.
got in this profession in the first place. We have to create space for that. And that creates space for clarity because when we're always in motion, when we're always doing, when we're a busybody, we miss critical information, critical signals, both from our body and our environment, what's happening around us, that could help us make better decisions. And so there's this misconception that we talked about a couple times now that slowing down means I'm falling behind. But in reality, it's gaining the mental and spiritual bandwidth to identify what actually moves the needle, what actually makes an impact, what creates change for real. And when we slow down in a strategic way, in an intentional way, we can accelerate our path to meaningful success because we're operating from a place of clarity rather than chaos. And the thing that I want to drive this home with is when you think about the most impactful leaders and innovators that that we all know, they're not the ones that are working 24/7, that are
Mm.
always doing something. They're the ones who've mastered the rhythm of intense focus, followed by intentional, physical, and spiritual recovery. And that is how we can build sustainable success, but it's
I,
built with the main principle of understanding the need for rest.
I love that. And as you were talking, you made me think about, I'm as a Christian, I study the Bible regularly, and I just kind of was reflecting on how the impact of Jesus's ministry, like he only worked his ministry for 3 years and had a major impact. In fact, we're still living out the impact that he had on the world. And he was very intentional about pulling away after exerting. There's countless scriptures where he pulled away. He went off by himself to pray, to restore, to rejuvenate. And, we have to learn how to do that as leaders as well, just like you said, because it enables us to show up as our best selves. So, with all of the like the craziness that's going on, all the demands that we have in this connectivity that we have, how can leaders prioritize taking time to slow down, taking these pauses and practicing self-care, like practicing intentional rest in order for them to be their best selves?
Yeah, well, I think you brought up the perfect example. I think it is very wise to look at the example that Jesus has set for us. The first thing that let's just go to the commandments that were given to us. The longest commandment of the 10 commandments is to keep the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath. Now, this isn't a legalistic thing about like make sure that you sit down and do nothing for 24 hours, but it's a hey, make sure you take 24 hours to rest and to worship, to disconnect from the way that you do life typically. And we're told to set it aside as it's holy. So set that day aside to not be how you are all of those other productive days. Take it a day aside to rest and worship. And this is the type of rest that our soul craves. You think about it. You see an advertisement for like a really amazing robe at a tropical vacation, and it's selling an experience, it's selling a feeling. For 19.99 you can have this robe and you'll have this rest, and for $2,000 you can have this experience at Sandals and you'll have this rest. But Jesus is inviting us to have that experience for free once a week, and then make that a lifestyle. And so I realized that this is kind of like a radical idea, and it's kind of counterculture in a way, but it's so necessary. And that's the example that I have. And even before, Jesus started that short, ministry, the first thing that he did was he went out into the eremos, which is the wilderness, which is like an uncomfortable place, and was in that discomfort. But in that place, he was prepared. In that place, he was restored because he was connecting to something greater than himself. Okay, so that's what we have to understand. We have to make this a posture, a way of moving through life. If you're not religious, that's fine. This isn't a religious idea. It's a spiritual one, and it's not a rule. You don't get punished for not following it, and that's theology that we can get into. But it's a suggestion that's really worth following. And there's a group of people, before I get too far off the rails here, there's a group of people that were studied, and they're called the Seventh-day Adventists. And what was found in the Adventist community is not only are they happier than everybody else, they live on average 10 years longer than everybody else. And the reason that is because if you take the average life expectancy of a male or a female, and they saw this 10-year increased life expectancy across both genders, if you take the average life expectancy and you multiply a 24-hour pause over that life expectancy, it averages 10 years. So we can understand from scripture, from something very ancient, from Jesus, that rest is profitable, that rest is restorative, that rest is revolutionary. And we don't have to really, how do we do it? We can just look to the example. Well, maybe if I just started by setting one day aside, one 24-hour period to be different than I am in all the other days. So I run all of my activities for that day through a simple filter. Hey, am I resting right now, or am I worshiping right now? And that looks different, whether you're a nonprofit leader, whether you're a teenager, whether you're single, whether you're married. It looks different, but it's a simple filter. This isn't legalistic. This is freedom. Hey, is what I'm about to do right now, is it rest or is it worship? If it's not, let me set it aside and do it another day, because I've set this day aside to be holy. I've set this day aside to rest and restore myself in all of the ways that I can't get any other way.
That's so good. And I love that. I love the filter that you're about, like being conscientious, being intentional about asking yourself those questions, because it's easy, because we're it's almost, we're addicted to our work, to work, right? And if we're not asking ourselves, if we're not pausing before we go to do the thing, to say like, what is this activity doing? Like, is this rest? Is this a form of worship? And if you can't answer yes to that, then save it for
another day. Just do it later.
Exactly. And giving yourself that space, and you determine what that looks like, right? Like it's not, we're not saying that you've got to go be in prayer, for 24 hours, or go be in some sort of religious service, or stay in bed all day. That's not necessarily rest. You may be inactive, but that may not necessarily mean rest. And I think that we have to distinguish that, because oftentimes we feel like people will say, well, I rest every day. They come home from work and plop down in front of the TV and binge on Netflix shows or Hulu or whatever it is that they do, or play video games. And they're like, oh, well, I'm resting. I'm like, no, because rest is intentional, right? That's just,
Right.
you're just doing another activity. You're not working. You've transferred your energy from one thing to something that you perceive to be enjoyable, but it's not really, you're not going into it intentionally. Versus like now Netflixing and chilling can be rest, right? If you're intentional about it and you're saying like, okay, you know what, when I get home today, I'm going to take an hour and watch my favorite show and have a glass of wine and eat popcorn or whatever that thing is for you, and turn off my phone and shut down my computer and just be inaccessible to the world for 1 hour. That is intentional,
Yeah.
versus just kind of haphazardly doing things.
That's right. And like you said, we have to remember that, physical rest is for physical exertion. And most of us in what we're doing on a day-to-day base isn't physically exerting ourselves. So
No,
it's like
it's
we
mentally
look at
exerting ourselves.
it's mentally exerting ourselves. So we need a different type of rest for that, like we talked about. We need something different from that. We need something that doesn't, have that digital drain like a screen, right? Like we
Right.
need something that doesn't do that to us. We need and we need to run to something that does build that side of our brain. Like you said, like let's have a glass of wine on Friday night and have a slow, long, easy dinner. That is practicing that Sabbath as, Jesus and God intended it.
Yeah.
Like,
I think we have lost the art of being.
yeah,
We've lost the art of literally just being, and we feel like, if we're not doing something, we've got to grab our device, or we got to get on the computer, or we got to turn the TV on. We've got to have all of this activity around us, and we don't know how to just sit and be with ourselves, be with our thoughts, be with our emotions, or even be, in present in nature. I know for me, journaling and physical journaling, not digital journaling, but physical journaling, and doing mindfulness meditations really have helped me to learn how to calm down, slow down, not well, calm down too, but slow down and really be with self before I be with everyone else. What are some other things that you recommend for
yeah,
people to kind of slow down and create just moments in their day? Beside, okay, they're like, Trisata said, I can't, I'm not ready to go into this 24-hour thing. How can I start to incorporate in small ways into my day periods of rest or periods of pause?
yeah. This is my favorite one. Drive the speed limit. Literally slow down. Literally force yourself to slow down. Move slower. Why do you need to go 5 over? Why do you need to go 10 over? Why do you need to go 20 miles over the speed limit? What if you just drove the speed limit? What if you just accepted this is the speed limit and I am just going to stay in my lane and move at that speed and watch what comes up for you? Watch how that feels. Watch how literally slowing yourself down impacts everything else. Think about the space and that presence that your mind is now free to have while you're driving when you're not so concerned about being in the fast lane and having to slow down and speed up and move over and get around somebody else. Like this is incongruent with a spiritual way of being, a spiritual lifestyle. Just get in the car and go the speed limit. That's the first one. Let me just sit that down there. I saw your face reacting to that.
Like, oh my gosh, some Leadfoot over here. But yeah, you made me think about a couple summers ago. I went to, when I was kind of in one of these forced pauses, I went to Key Cocker, Belize, and it's a small, tiny island off of the coast of Belize, and there's no cars. The cars or the transportation, the taxis are golf carts. The roads aren't paved, it's just dirt roads, and
Mm,
many of the locals don't even wear shoes because it's just so small. But their motto is go slow, and I was very intentional because I went on this trip specifically for kind of like a retreat, a personal retreat. I didn't take my laptop. Once I got there, I put my phone on Wi-Fi only. So only if I was on resort property that I have access to the internet, the outside world, if you will. And I had all these plans of, I was going to journal, I was going to do all these, read all these books. And I did a little bit of journaling, I did a little bit of reading, but not to the extent that I had planned, because once I got there and in that environment, I realized I literally needed that time to slow down and be. And I thought that being alone for a week, I was going to be bored, but it was the absolute best time I have ever had in my life with myself.
Say that. Say
And
that.
I did not want to come back. When I hit, I had a connecting flight in Houston. And once I got into the airport, all of the hustle and bustle, the noise, the sounds, like everything was grating on my nerves, because now I had gotten used to that bubble of being slow and present. And so now I really seek ways for me to create that environment in my everyday life. And I try not to allow myself to get into that mode of like, go, 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 go. And try to recognize that, hey, you've got a lot on your plate. Be intentional about building in some time to pause. So anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox there, but it really is transformative
Yeah.
to take that time to disconnect from the world, right? And our devices and the world and everything. Whew.
Yeah. And like you said, it's you can bring that bubble with you everywhere. It's a
Mhm.
way of being. It's a way of moving through the world. So, it's
Absolutely.
important to create it for ourselves. It's important to, go the speed limit. It's important to, choose the longer line from time to time, and like look at people in the face, and just slow down and just be there for a moment. And
Yeah.
that trip sounds that trip to Belize sounds incredible. And to be honest, like, to your point, like the Sabbath is the thing that I look forward to every week. It's the highlight of my week, the week where I do the least. It's like I indulge in joy and happiness and
Yeah.
being. And that's the happiest time of the week. And that's my hope for everyone, who listens to this, is that they can experience that more.
This was so, so good. Oh my gosh. You really helped to kind of empower us to create some shifts right now, today in our lives, by slowing down and incorporating rest into our days, and really starting to shift our mindset around slowing down, not necessarily meaning sacrificing our success or sacrificing our growth. It's really a way for us to amplify our efforts and to really achieve the things that we desire, whether it's, our own personal things or the missions and the impacts of the organizations that we lead. And so I really want to say thank you for that. Before we go, where can our listeners learn more about you and the work that you do?
Yeah, so you can head to emotionallyempoweredleaders.com, and there you can schedule a consult with me. And we can just talk. We can get to know each other, and we can take a look at, how can you incorporate some of these strategies and some of the things that we talked about into your life. And I look forward to connecting with anyone who stops by.
Awesome. Sid, thank you so much for being here. Now, for those of you who may be ready to take your team's emotional intelligence and teamwork to the next level, I definitely want to encourage you to check out my upcoming teamwork tune up intensive. It's a 1 day intensive that's going to help your teams strengthen their relationships, improve communication, and achieve greater results and impact. You can learn more and register at theteamworktuneup.com. And as always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. Your feedback really helps us to reach more nonprofit leaders and have a greater impact on the nonprofit community. Sid, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your incredible insights and your expertise with us. It's really been an inspiring chat with you. And to all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And until next time, keep leading with purpose and with passion.